My name is Joe Grabowski.
I'm Arnie Lowenstein.
Julie Shimofsky Kivo.
My name is Nate Birnbaum.
Robert Burke.
My name is Bill Getzler.
My name is Larry Backow.
Deborah Reich.
Cyril Mazansky.
My name is Lucia Meyerson-David.
Gregory Kaidanov.
Jeffrey Goldberg.
My name is Mark Gundersheim.
Sharon Polk-Sadownik.
Ariella Rosengard. My name is Varda Farber.
I'm Cheryl Stober.
Dennis Buchenholz.
Eric Unger is my name.
My name is Pedro Ronaldo Morgan.
Rochelle Borden.
My name is Naomi Greenfield.
Ethan Epstein.
My name is Marcus Weiss.
I'm Blair Borden.
Ethan Neil Schaff.
I'm Julia Marie Priest.
I'm Walter Strauss.
My name is Siegfried Michael Turner.
Hanna Berkovich.
Mulya Rzhevsky, now known as Sidney Rzhevsky Handler.
My parents.
Both my parents.
Both my parents.
My grandmother and my great-uncle.
My grandfather.
My father.
Both survivors.
Survivors of the Holocaust.
Survived the war in Europe.
Escaped Nazi Germany.
Helped liberate Buchenwald.
Managed to escape by himself.
Both my parents.
My mother, her sister, and her brother.
My Grandpa Joe.
My grandfather.
My siblings and my parents.
My parents.
My mother and two of her sisters.
Both of my parents.
Both of my parents.
Managed to survive quite an amazing ordeal.
Both survived independently.
The entire family remained intact throughout the Holocaust.
Both survivors of the Holocaust.
Survivors.
Holocaust survivors.
Survived the Holocaust in one manner, shape, or form.
I was born on October 10th, 1924.
November 1926.
November 331.
In 1937.
May 20th, 1938.
I was born in Vienna.
Chop, Slovakia. That's where I was born.
In Hamburg, Germany.
In Aachen, Germany.
In Leningrad, Soviet Union.
I think it's important for people to understand that it touched people that they know directly.
It became imprinted on my DNA.
It really influenced my childhood.
My life was very intertwined with this.
I think my whole life has been colored by the fact that he was a survivor.
In some sense, I'm a survivor, just like my parents are, my brother.
I've realized how much the Holocaust affected her, affected my grandparents, certainly, and has really affected all of our lives.
It's touched many, 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 many lives. People who are living today and dealing with it today and questioning it today. There's still so many questions that are unanswered.
You know, my own world is, is connected to other people and places, and I'm just one person who is able to be here because of my grandparents, and they're only able to be here because of their struggle and because of a righteous woman who saved them.
I wouldn't be the same person had I not had the parents I had.
I mean, it has a tremendous impact on our lives. I think as children of survivors, we feel guilt a lot.
I had a very, very different childhood, I think.
Knowing the story of how my family died has had profound impact, both positive, both from a closure point of view and, negative, hurtful aspect, but c'est la vie.
I have to tell you the story. I have to keep thinking about it.
His story is amazing.
My mother and her brother and her mother had a very similar story as Anne Frank. The only difference is my mother survived.
They have gone through hell.
And my father said he became well known in the Plaszow concentration camp because he was the first person who was ever sentenced to death by the commandant and wasn't carried out.
Where did he get the guts to do that? Why wasn't he scared of them? That was the Gestapo.
He had made a promise to his father before he left. The promise was to become a doctor. So my father conceived of an idea, conceived of a device that would be miniaturized, that could be implanted, and that would be able to deliver the electrical stimulus to the heart. And Israel had no money to pursue this type of research. So he came to Baltimore, the only city he had lived in America before, and started working at a small hospital, a community hospital called Sinai Hospital of Baltimore. And there, in the basement of Sinai Hospital, he invented the defibrillator, which looked like this. But this was not accepted by the medical community, in part because he was a foreigner. It wasn't done at Harvard or Hopkins or one of the great centers. And people accused him of wanting to put a bomb into people. But he persevered, and for 10 years, for almost a decade, he was ridiculed in the medical literature, and in the editorials were saying terrible things about him. And I remembered years later when I went to medical school, and I asked my father, and I ended up doing research as well, I asked him how he survived that type of ridicule and that type of derision and exclusion and ostracism. And he said to me, you know, I survived Hitler, and I survived Stalin. These guys, they're amateurs.
The gentleman asked my grandfather, he said, my wife is in New York. If there's any way you could find her, you know, he'd be so grateful. And my grandmother was in New York, so my grandfather sent a letter to my grandmother, and my grandmother found the woman.
I remember seeing a red flag flying from the mast of a public school one day, and the next day it was a swastika.
Within a few minutes, we separated forever.
What these people endured, escaping, or people that were in the concentration camps or just living through that time, took a tremendous amount of willpower.
The amazing sacrifices that people made, you know, in different ways, but sacrifices really for the purpose of trying to rescue our people and our heritage.
At the end of the war, they were transported to Auschwitz. And my mother was the only member who survived.
My mother and two of her sisters, an uncle and a nephew, and my brother would live within 2 walls, just standing up the whole day. And if one needed to turn around because they got tired, they all needed to turn around.
One time, they actually signed a death document. The doctor said that the pleurisy that he had in his lungs had enlarged his left lung so much that it literally pushed his heart to the center of his chest. In giving the accounting for how many prisoners there were, subtracted 1 for my father. And all of a sudden, the fever broke, and my father's lungs cleared up miraculously overnight. And in fact, a commandant in that camp was very upset with the doctor for falsifying the records. And so he said to him, you are responsible for this man's life.
After much more waiting and more paperwork and so on, running around, we got everything together, including, we got tickets and the police certificates and finally the visa and affidavit and God knows what. And we're getting ready to leave. We thought we were getting ready to leave, and we were essentially ordered to report to the Umschlagplatz, the collection place. On the very day that we were supposed to report to the concentration camp, we got clearance to leave.
She was the product of you know, the atrocities that the Nazis had inflicted on many people. I mean, she was 21 years old and, you know, weighed under 100 pounds, and, you know, her hair was white and malnourished, but you know, she's an amazing lady. I mean, you know, she was able to survive when others didn't.
It's funny, when we had our struggles, like everybody does, she would always say to us, I'm a survivor, you can survive. Whatever it is, you can survive.
How they were able to survive, having lost everyone, is amazing.
The further you get from that suffering, the more distant it is, the harder it is to understand how really fortunate you are to live in the circumstances that we do.
One of her most prized possessions was a photograph of me, and And on the back, there was an inscription on it, and my dad had sent it to her, and it said, you know, this is Naomi and Joshua Greenfield, who are the third generation of survivors who are forever indebted to you. For saving Rochelle Greenfield during the Nazi occupation.
We wonder what it would have been had we been there. Could we have done it?
And I thought, what would happen if there was something like that again, and it affected me? Would I try to pass as an Aryan, or would I admit to being Jewish? And it felt to me then that I would absolutely 100% claim being Jewish.
All my life I've thought, would I have just cried and begged for mercy?
Even as a child, I always knew that I can go through anything, because nothing I go through is as bad as what my parents went through.
My mother was taking me to the trucks to be taken away. And walked by a closet. She shot me. She threw me into the closet. I stayed there for about 24 hours. She didn't know if I survived or not.
I just would never really, I could never really understand the feeling and like the way that she grew up.
I could hear in his voice that he was talking about things that he didn't get to do when he was young. You know, like he said it made him feel young. He didn't say it made him feel young again, because he always talked about how he missed that whole, you know, his whole youth, basically.
I think it comes down to that everybody's experience was different, but there are a lot of unifying factors as well.
There were also other profound, very unpleasant aspects to it. When a few years after we'd found out the story, I'm a radiologist, and at that time I was doing a lot of interventional work. And there was a patient admitted to my hospital under the care of one of the surgeons whose name was Leleikis. Now this man, he was a Lithuanian in charge of the underlings under German supervision, responsible for most likely for the murder of my family. And I walked into the procedure room, I looked at this, and can you imagine the feeling that you're looking on at your family's murderer?
My mother always used to say to me, Larry, what's the worst that can happen to you? Can you live with that? Then why worry? And of course, she had seen the worst that could happen to anybody.
Continue to educate, especially the young people.
The importance of at a very early age, instilling in Jewish children the values and helping them understand their Jewish identity.
One of the things that I try and do is live a righteous life.
I think the life lesson from that is basically, you have to be thankful for what happened.
I am very conscious of the preciousness of life.
Things could always be worse. No matter how bad things are, they could really always be worse.
Yeah, that mentality of it could always be worse.
I think we have to continue teaching about other cultures and embracing them and not putting up dividing walls and said it's us and them.
I think it's important that my kids and my neighbors and friends and their children understand that this didn't happen in a history book. It happened to people they know.
She was on a train, and there were two soldiers that were bringing her food, and they were, that it was a gift, and it was not something she was expecting, and just the goodness that she's able to find in everybody and in different things in life.
And I love children, and I consider them a great gift. Nature, flowers, children, they enhance our life.
You really cannot take your freedoms for granted.
it was very much a conscious decision on her part. She said, I could have been bitter for the rest of my life, in which case Hitler would have won, or I could live life well, and that would be my revenge.
I don't know how else to avenge their blood, but to make sure that they're not forgotten.
If things repeated themselves, would things be any different? I don't know.
But we have to make that history meaningful to our own lives.
We can't let it ever happen again.
We shouldn't forget because of the danger of repeating it.
The biggest danger is of kind of not actively remembering.
The people in Germany are people like we are, like other people are in the world, and that there is a dark side to all humans.
Treat people as human beings, to appreciate their suffering.
The issue of recognizing reality for what it is and dealing with it directly instead of hoping and avoiding to make a decision is what I'm concerned about.
Unfortunately, you know, in recent times, I mean, we've seen, you know, genocides occur in different parts of the world.
Some of the history has already started to repeat itself. We should stop with the genocides that are going on in the world today.
Ostensibly normal people can become very cruel or very standoffish, very non-interested, very turned off to the reality. And I'm afraid that could happen again. Not necessarily in Europe, but all over.
For me, what's important to tell my children is that, yes, you need to hear the story, you need to tell the story for the reason so that it will never, ever happen again. Period.
Well, the main reason that we should never forget is, as it was said, those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it.
How could I not raise a Jewish family when his family died for that purpose?
We are a generation or a couple of generations of overachievers for a reason.
It's a cliche, but if you don't learn from history, you repeat it.
Never again, not just when we are the target, but when anybody is the target.
We cannot be, we should be quiet, passive, irrelevant. We should be very proactive.
It's real, but it's surreal.
The obligation that everybody has with regard to the Holocaust, and that is to bear witness.
It'll be with me to the day I die.
This didn't happen in a history
We
book.
can't let it ever happen again.
Never
We can
again.
never, ever let anything like that happen again.
Is real. Those lives that were lost were not lost in vain.
We can't let it ever happen again.
You are our
You have to
future.
do the best you can with the physical ability
There is a
you
dark
have.
side to all
Don't
humans.
take anything for granted here.
Continue to educate.
We can never, ever let anything like that happen
You
again.
are our
You
future.
have to do the best
What's the
you
worst that can happen to you?
Things could always be worse.
Can you live with that? Then why worry?
I'm a survivor, you can survive. Whatever it is, you can survive.
Treat people as human
Continue
beings.
teaching about other cultures.
You are proof that Hitler was not successful.
Never again when anybody is the target. When anybody is the target.